Hello, comrades. This isn't a rage video. This isn't a list of statements disguised as questions. This isn't virtue signaling or anything like that. This is my honest attempt to look at the issues in today's society. This is for you, my dear watcher. Whether you call yourself a social justice warrior, liberal, anti-Trump, it doesn't matter. Even if you're an anti-SJW, conservative and pro-Trump, this is for you. I know that there are smart people out there willing to do something to make all our lives better. This video is for those people. This video is for you. So please, stick with me and give me some of your time. I'd be happy if you could watch the entire video. Thanks. Dear friend, why are we so divided? Why do we fight passionately with each other all over the world? What do we want? What do we really want? It's a real question. What do we want? And I don't mean right now, at this moment. I don't mean on a superficial level. I mean it on the deepest level possible. Is there something that would make us satisfied in a way that wouldn't leave us with wanting something more? Is there something that we all ultimately want? I believe the answer is actually very simple. We want to be happy. We want to be happy. We all want to be happy in one way or another. Isn't that right? Don't you want to be happy? I think we both know the answer, my friend. We don't want pain. We don't want to be hungry. We don't want to be thirsty. We don't want to suffer, right? I know I don't want to suffer. Through human history, we always wanted to avoid suffering, and we were always concerned with injustice and ignorance, and in our imagination, we would picture a perfect society where everything just works, where there's no suffering, where everyone is happy. Somewhere along the way, unfortunately, we lost track of what it is that we want. We completely forgot about the most important practical question. What can I, as a human being, do to maximize my own happiness and the happiness of my fellow humans? Instead, we rage over superficialities. We rage over vague principles and ideologies and beliefs. We fight over labels without ever stopping to think, why is it that we're fighting for the thing that we're fighting for? My friend, I do believe that you understand what I mean, don't you? Like you, I too have ideas about what would be best for humanity, and I too want to be happy in a happier world, without so much suffering. Instead of rambling on and on from an abstract point of view, let me tell you my story. The story of how I got to where I am now. I was born in Croatia, when Croatia, as we know it today, was born. I was born in a country that just got out of war with Serbia, in a time when war was still destroying lives and homes in neighboring Bosnia, in a time when Roman Catholic Croatians, Orthodox Catholic Serbs, and Muslim Bosniaks were deeply divided and killing each other as the former country of Yugoslavia was falling apart. You see, people in the Balkans like to hold on to their historical disputes, disagreements, and they hold to it way too tightly. Because of that, and the recent war, I grew up surrounded with people that openly supported ideas that should have ended with World War II. Openly fascist people who wanted to see the old World War II Croatia, a Nazi puppet state with concentration camps where Serbs were slaughtered along with Jews and Gypsies and some other people. The fact that Serbs committed quite a few atrocities during the last war, the recent war, killing Croatians and Bosniaks, didn't really help to calm down the situation. Anyway, I hated it. I wanted us all to get along because I saw that we had much more in common than we'd like to admit. That's the reason why I always disliked nationalism and I considered myself a communist. I listened to all the stories from socialist Yugoslavia and I was pretty devastated when I realized that we had a great opportunity, but we had to screw it all up because of nationalism and overly exaggerated cultural differences. I don't know where you're from, my friend, but I'm sure you can relate to my feelings at that time in one way or another. I also considered myself a communist because anti-fascism has its roots here in Croatia. My grandparents lived under military occupation by Mussolini's fascists and the SS, German Nazis. Here, anti-fascism meant actual anti-fascism. It was ordinary working people with weapons and guerrilla tactics fighting for common men, fighting for freedom, fighting against actual Nazis, against literally Hitler. So naturally, I discovered socialism and I thought, this is it. This is good. This would be the perfect society. And as I was becoming more interested in political and social issues, I also discovered Marxism and I discovered anarchism. And I was thrilled. It all made sense to me. I would lay down as a teenager and I would get lost in my own thoughts, imagining what a perfect world we could have had. So I spent quite a few years passionately arguing with people. I had read all the fundamentals and I wanted to explain to people that they got it all wrong. I wanted to explain that communism is simply a social ideology. It was an idea hijacked and bastardized by Stalin, Mao Zedong, and similar totalitarian leaders. It wasn't communism itself that was responsible for gulags and other atrocities. Real communism really never actually existed. It was people who took the idea and used it to serve their own interests that ruined everything. But then again, I'd argue that former Yugoslavia was probably the closest thing to actual communism, so my views were obviously a bit skewed. Of course, I never denied the fact that some awful things happened here during the communist regime, but I still like the ideas. I like them a lot. I'd get into long arguments with people trying to explain original Marxism, trying to explain that anarchy doesn't mean chaos and disorder. I tried to convince them that anarcho-syndicalism is the way to go. At that time, I was involved in the atheist versus Christian debates because I really disliked authoritarian ideas, and that partially explains why I liked anarchism so much. So you could say that I was a kind of social justice warrior. I resented rules, authority, and what I perceived as injustice. I even went to one of the first gay pride parades in my hometown because I wanted to show support for the LGBT community and I wanted to piss off the hooligans and skinheads who wanted to beat them up. Of course, they couldn't do shit because the parade was protected by special police forces with high tech equipment. Although the situation wasn't that bad even in those days, there were still cases where hooligans would beat up gay people, and I had some gay friends, I still do, so I wanted to go mostly out of solidarity. The LGBT movement was pretty different though. Back in those days, people would actually try to engage in reasonable discussions, and even the most extreme, unreasonable discussions now seem to me much more civil than what we usually see today. People actually wanted to understand each other, at least more than they do these days. At that time, I was also leading a local fraction of the Zeitgeist movement, and I was interested in Jacques Fresco and his Venus project. I met a lot of people, activists, because of that movement, and I realized that too many of them were paranoid conspiracy theorists who jumped on every crazy story without thinking. And some of those conspiracy theories even contradicted each other, but these guys still believed it. So I gave it all up, lost all hope, and focused on my neuroscience studies. I was always involved with the scientific community in one way or another. I was always hungry for more knowledge, and I spent a lot of time studying the human mind, evolutionary psychology, and biology, among other things, before I went into physics. This had a profound effect on me. Very soon, partially because of those atheist debates, I realized that humans aren't born a blank slate. I realized that you could explain so much by studying evolution and looking at things from the evolutionary point of view. I learned that there's this thing called human nature, which makes a lot of sense from the evolutionary perspective, and it's not something that changes easily. Suddenly, communism, socialism, anarchism, and the Venus Project began to fall apart in my mind. They didn't make so much sense all of a sudden. They still seemed like good ideas, but I simply couldn't see how they could ever be compatible with human nature, our behavior, psychology, and social dynamics. It's not something for the human species. And that's how I still feel today. Humans are ultimately tribal creatures. We like to own things, and we want to be guided. We want to be led by a leader. If you throw a bunch of people somewhere where they're completely free, they will form groups, and someone will be the leader in one form or another. You don't have to read all the scientific papers about experiments investigating those things. You probably understand that this would happen perfectly well. When confronted with such facts of reality, I think it's wrong to ignore them simply because we don't like them. Reality doesn't always play by our rules, and We should try to understand it to make the best of it, instead of wishing for something impossible, or worse, forcing our ideas onto others. Reality won't change. It is what it is. A fish can hate the water as much as it likes, and you'd think that you were doing it a favor by taking it out of the water. Surely the fish would thank you, and then it would die. Anyway, my friend, this brings me to where I am today. And you might wonder, what is my religion? What is my social and political ideology? What do I believe in? Well, as far as religion goes, I'm non-religious and purely agnostic. I don't know where the universe ultimately comes from, why we're here, and what happens when we die. I don't know, and I don't hold any particular beliefs about those things. I don't mind not knowing. As Richard Feynman said, it is much more interesting not to know. As far as political and social issues go, I have some ideas, but I choose not to label myself. Why? Two simple reasons. First, ideologies are never simple. They are complex and they include a large body of ideas. And there simply isn't one such ideology that accurately represents my thoughts, opinions, and ideas. Second, even if such an ideology existed, I would still hesitate to label myself under its name. As with communism, an ideology is inevitably entangled with its history, and sometimes it even becomes its history. To make things worse, words and ideas change their meaning and value. They mean different things in different times and in different places. Context is everything. Even if you choose a particular ideology, you will almost certainly disagree with someone who goes under the same label, and you will think that they misunderstood the whole thing and that you know better. I think you've experienced something like that yourself, my friend, haven't you? Just for the record, I'm still an anti-fascist, but today they aren't really that many actual fascists. Nowadays, people call themselves anti-fascists for all the wrong reasons. They use it as a license to fight against whomever they choose to call a fascist or a Nazi, and then you get these silly questions like, is it okay to punch a Nazi? I hope you're not doing that, my friend. I believe you're smart enough to recognize the silliness of calling people Nazis and fascists. There's gotta be a better way to express your disagreement or disliking of someone. Anyway, I think that ideologies are trash and they cause problems that are far worse than semantic confusion. They bring discussions and conversations to a very superficial level, and suddenly everything revolves around completely silly questions. Is he a blah blah blahist? Doesn't she support blah blah blahism? That sounds blah blah blahist. You know what I'm talking about. We have the ability to use so many words, and we can engage in really complex conversations. Isn't it silly that we dismiss our superpowers and we never bother to go into the core ideas behind words? Instead of bashing someone for being a liberal, wouldn't it be more constructive to discuss the exact thing that bothers us? Instead of calling someone a racist, wouldn't it be more constructive to discuss the thing that made us think that someone is racist and to think about their particular actions or words in context? So this brings me back to my original question. What do we really want? As I already said, in one way or another, we want to be happy. We all want to live. We all experience complex and intense emotions. We bleed when we cut ourselves and it hurts, and sometimes even words hurt us. We're all just human. Our differences are insignificant in comparison with our similarities. If this sounds trivial and obvious, it is because it is. And yet, we act like we don't really believe it, right? Dear friend, it is you and me and ordinary people who divide us. No single person can divide us if we don't divide ourselves. Instead of yelling that we won't let anyone divide us, we can simply not divide ourselves. In the end, it all comes to you, to me, to an individual. Don't try to change the world. Change yourself and encourage others to change themselves. Don't force them. It's counterproductive. Instead, be the example. Show them that change is possible. Let them see that there can be no growth without change. And most importantly, don't ever stop questioning yourself. If you think that you don't have to change, you'll probably miss a great opportunity to grow and improve yourself. We're not perfect. There's always room for improvement. So I think it's a good rule of thumb to always assume that you have to change. Of course, change isn't always an improvement, but every improvement is a change. So don't be afraid to change. It's never too late. And don't you see all the craziness in the world these days, my friend? I don't care if you're an SJW or an anti-SJW or a fence sitter. Everyone sees that the world has gone mad. And we all wish for balance in all things, but we're doing a terrible job. When something goes too left, we pull it all the way to the right, and then we pull it back to the left and right and left, and the pendulum simply keeps on swinging. So, what makes a physical pendulum stop? Of course, it's air, the friction between the pendulum and air molecules. Our metaphorical pendulum doesn't stop because it's swinging in the vacuum of our ignorance and apathy. Just like every single air molecule contributes to the friction, you and I can choose to be the molecules of reason and empathy. We can choose not to swing with the pendulum. I think you'll agree with me when I say that reason and empathy are the most important things if we want to bring more joy to the world and reduce suffering. So let me elaborate a bit more on those two things. From a purely practical perspective, why is reason important? Why is it important to be reasonable? To put it simply, like I already said, reality just is as it is. Our problems, whether they be something physical or something in our minds, are as real as reality gets, even if your problem is imagined, the mental pain and stress that come along with it are very real. And if we wish to solve our problems, if we wish to be happy, is it better to pretend that we know what's going on or to understand the reality of our problems? I think we all know the answer. We're given this powerful gift of reason, the key to knowledge of reality. It would be a real shame to squander that gift, right? Again, I'd like to quote Richard Feynman. As he said, "To every man is given the key to the gates of heaven. The same key opens the gates of hell. And so it is with science." This quote is particularly important when it comes to uncomfortable truths. We're smart. We're way too smart. And sometimes we discover things that we would really rather not have discovered. When we do discover such things, there's no point in trying to deny them. There's no such thing as unlearning. You cannot unsee what you saw. Instead, I think we should acknowledge the truth, live with it, and find a way to properly understand it and deal with it. For example, you probably know about those studies that relate race and IQ. The distribution curves have a significant overlap, but as it turns out, on average, East Asians have the highest IQ, followed by whites, Hispanics, and blacks. But forget about those results for a moment. I'm not asking you to believe that study. Instead, imagine if it were true. Imagine that somehow you knew for certain that some races on average have a higher IQ than other races. It's an unsettling result, don't you think? You wish it weren't true. But imagine that somehow it is. Mind you, we're talking about a hypothetical situation. I'm not asking you to believe it. But what should we do with such knowledge? Should we deny it? Should we bury our heads in the sand and ignore it because we don't like it? We could. We could do that. And we could erase it from scientific knowledge and act as if those questions shouldn't be asked. But I don't think it's particularly constructive. I think it's always better to know, because more knowledge only means a stronger connection with the real world. And the stronger that connection is, the more we can hope to accomplish. So, if that study, for example, were true, its results, what would be the best thing to do? The smartest thing to do? Instead of ignoring it, we could focus our efforts on teaching people how to understand statistics and probability, how to interpret the results properly. Instead of lying and covering stuff up, we could teach people that those results don't have to produce racism. We shouldn't tell people what to think and how to think. Instead, we should allow and encourage people to study the basics of statistics and probability and see for themselves what it is that such result would imply. And the same idea applies to all the sensitive questions, and we shouldn't be afraid to ask them. We shouldn't be afraid of knowledge. The evolution of human species is something that's been happening for thousands of years, and it may be the reason why there are some differences between races, why there are differences between sexes and stuff like that. Let us not ignore knowledge. We can't escape reality. Let us learn how to properly interpret those differences. Let's study the details of what causes them and what could we realistically do about them. One thing that certainly doesn't work is trying to change our language, how we speak and think about words that relate to those differences. In essence, that's just trying to escape reality. It won't work, it never worked. For example, consider homosexuality. Is it a disorder or is it something completely normal? That's not a good question, I think. It doesn't do anything. Such categories are simply social constructs. But what do they really mean? Homosexuality used to be seen as a disorder, and now it isn't. What a triumph! But no, it isn't a triumph. It's only a change in language we introduced to make ourselves feel better. Wouldn't it be smarter to look at the actual meaning behind those complex ideas? So, what's up with homosexuality? Instead of being normal or a disorder, let's break the idea down to pieces. Humans reproduce sexually. A sperm cell combines with an egg cell, fertilizes it, which triggers the growth of a brand new human life. Males provide sperm cells and females provide egg cells. So it shouldn't be a mystery that evolution resulted in males that are attracted to females and females that are attracted to males. But evolution isn't a simple process. Some variation inevitably occurs, and some females are attracted only to females, and some males are attracted only to males. It simply happens. Is it natural? I don't think that's a good question, because what does natural even mean? Why is a beaver dam or a beehive natural, and human-made dams and skyscrapers aren't? To an alien visiting our planet, everything would seem natural. So let us not ask such silly questions. We could ask a different question instead. Does homosexuality occur in other species? It does. It certainly does. But you'll never find a species where everyone is homosexual. They wouldn't be able to reproduce, and they would go extinct. For that reason, although homosexuality does happen, it isn't normal. It isn't normal. What is normal? It's not really a philosophical concept, it's a statistical statement. A normal characteristic of a population is something you'd expect to see when you pick out a random member of that population. If you have a bag of marbles and you stick your hand in it to pull out some marbles, maybe you'll find a blue one, and another blue marble, and 100 blue marbles, and then a green marble or a red one. Wouldn't you stop to think how curious it is to find a green marble in a bag of mostly blue marbles? Soon you discover that almost all marbles are blue and a handful are green or red. If someone were to ask you about that bag, you'd say that it's a bag of mostly blue marbles. Blue marbles are normal for that bag, and heterosexuality is normal for human species. This doesn't mean that homosexuals are somehow inferior or less valuable. This doesn't mean that they should be fixed in any way. This simply means that it is a statistical variation in the evolutionary process. It just happens and that's okay. If you're gay, there's nothing inherently wrong with you. You're just special. Not in a bad way, not in a good way. You're just a bit different than other humans, and that difference happens to be your sexual orientation, which is perfectly fine. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say about reason, my friend. And I hope it made sense to you. The second thing I wanted to talk about is empathy or compassion. What is empathy? It's really a simple observation that we all share the human condition. We all want to be happy and we don't want suffering. But it's more than that. It's a mindset in which we constantly remind ourselves that we're not alone in our experience of life. Everyone feels and thinks. Everyone has a world of their own in their heads. I want to make something clear, my friend. Don't think of compassion as some romantic, touchy-feely, flower power, new age feel good idea, because it's way more than that. It's the most practical way of making life better for ourselves and everyone around us. Here's a radical thought. Compassion is the most selfish and the most selfless concept ever. How's that? Well, if you want to live the best life there is, if you want to live in a way that's best for you, ultimately you would want to live in a perfect world, surrounded with amazing people who are capable of doing great things for you and for others. So, by practicing compassion, not only do you make yourself happy, but you directly affect the world around you, making it a slightly better place for you and for others. Because happiness only grows when shared. It's a win-win situation. And people tend to resonate with other people. An act of compassion makes others feel good. It inspires them to be more compassionate, more calm, and ultimately more productive and useful for the entire society. A single act of compassion can send ripples through society. It can take a life on its own and make a more profound impact than you'd ever imagine. In a similar way, an act of rage, aggression, or violence can cause a lot of damage. If you're driving a car during heavy rain and you decide to speed through a puddle next to a bus stop, you'll piss a lot of people off. Maybe one of them was a doctor who was already nervous because some douchebag blocked his car in the parking lot and now he's running late. That doctor might be a surgeon with an important surgery to perform that day on someone's best friend. And he might make a mistake because he was too stressed and the hospital chief yelled at him for being late and the entire puddle thing didn't help much either. You get my point. Of course, it's a highly contrived situation, but just because you don't get to see all the consequences of your actions, it doesn't mean that there are no consequences. But there's the other side to that story. Some people will act like jerks, and there's not much you can do about it. You won't change them if they don't want to change themselves. Such is life. But you can do something about it. You can do something about yourself, which is always the smartest way to go. Instead of being easily enraged, instead of getting triggered by everything and everyone. Toughen up, develop a better attitude, and when something hits you right where it hurts, calm yourself down. Think about why it happened and why it hurts so much. If a bird pooped on your head, could you really blame the bird? Do you really think that it knew what it was doing? Should you take out your drone, attach a gun to it, and spend the rest of the day trying to find that damn bird? What good does it do? It won't clean the crap from your hair. If someone insults you, don't explode right back at them. Think about why they would do such a thing. Think about all the times when you were rude to someone. You don't have to condone their behavior, but try to understand it, even if it's only for practical reasons. Because this little mental exercise really does take a bit of that sting out of whatever hurt you. And I'm not saying that you should do it because of yourself. Do it for others, do it for everyone. Toughen up, and when a ripple of rage, aggression, or violence hits you, be strong enough to say, no, I won't let it spread further. It stops here, I won't get triggered, it stops at me. Is it fair? Fuck no, it's not fair. Why should you be the sucker that takes the impact instead of letting it flow? Why should you be the one to stop it from spreading? It's not your responsibility. Why should you care? Well, someone has to. I know, my friend. It's not a particularly satisfying answer. But such is reality. And if you want to make any meaningful impact on the society, that's the most practical thing you could do. It's not fair. But make a pact with yourself. Act as if you had to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders but couldn't tell anyone. It's definitely not easy. But nothing in this world that's worth anything comes easy. And this is where I end my letter, my friend, my comrade. And I hope it made some sense to you, because it makes sense to me. I don't know all the answers, but damn it, these pointless fights and divisions, twisting of language and facts, it won't get us anywhere. And really, we have no one but ourselves on this earth. There's no one out there to save us, and our lives are short. We're humans from planet Earth, and there's no one like us in the universe. Maybe there isn't even any life at all elsewhere. So instead of screaming and yelling into the abyss that doesn't care, instead of wasting our insignificant nanosecond in the life of the universe raging about pointless, trivial shit, let's put some things into goddamn perspective and pull our shit together. Let's make sure that tomorrow brings more reason and empathy than today. Let's not forget about what we really want. And maybe, just maybe, someday in the future, we will live to see a better world. So this letter is for you, my friend, but it's also for me. Because I'm far from perfect and I'm still working to improve myself and live in accordance with these ideas. Because it's not easy. And this message is for everyone. But I won't fool myself. Some of you will think it's cheesy, some of you will think it's pointless and crap. Such is life. I just hope that you, my friend, will take some time to think about these ideas and share my message with others. And if I manage to inspire you to think at least about one of these ideas, my work here is done. It's all I could ask for. Yours truly, a fellow human being squatting erudite. Have an above average day, and thank you for listening.